Hi, welcome to Lights Camera Author. I'm Jim Juno, and I have with me today a very special guest. His name is Adam Nimoy, and if his last name sounds familiar, it should. He is the son of Leonard Nimoy of Star Trek fame, not just Star Trek, but a whole bunch of other stuff. And Adam is a producer and a director in his own right, and he has a new book out. It's entitled The Most Human, and it is a story of reconciling with your father. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
This book I read the book today, and I reread it a little about an hour ago. Um, this must have been a hard book for you to write.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of difficult stuff in there to work through. It's kind of cathartic to do it, to delve into it, my relationship with my dad and how it affected other relationships in my life. But I think it gave me a much deeper understanding of what my dad was all about, what it meant, our relationship meant, in the long run. It was very rewarding in a lot of ways too. I had a very interesting life with my dad, Leonard.
I can imagine. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a geek, okay? So, and I'm a Trekkie from way back, um, back from the original series. I was one of those millions of people who wrote letters to NBC to please do not cancel Star Trek.
Hmm.
In my little 6-year-old world, I needed that. Um, but your father, like you say in the book, your father, he was a workaholic even before Star Trek. He was always doing something, and not just on the screen or on the stage. If he was home, he was always doing something too, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, he was big on home improvement projects. Yeah, he was very good with a toolkit.
But during pre Star Trek era, he was in like the Outer Limits. He was on the Twilight Zone. He did a lot of episodic television, and he took him away from home a lot, didn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was just not around very much because he was either hustling to do the odd jobs to keep cash coming in between his acting gigs, or he was out working in episodic TV. He did a lot of episodic TV. I mean, if you look at IMDb, it's an extensive list of mostly of my favorite shows, Man from Uncle and Get Smart and Sea Hunt and shows like that, Gunsmoke, and it just goes on and on. So he was just not, I mean, he was very driven and he didn't have a lot of, I mean, he's a self-made man. He came out to LA with nothing, so he really had to hustle. He had all these odd jobs going on all the time. So that was his focus at that point in his life.
Right. And for those of you who don't know, and I learned this just recently from reading your book, I didn't know he was originally from Boston.
Oh yeah, his parents emigrated there from Ukraine in the 1920s, late 1920s. My dad was born in 1931 in Boston. Raised in the West End, was a kind of a tenement area with Italians, Irish, and Russian Jews. It was a real bubble of immigrant population. But he loved his life there because he got a lot of support there. There were a lot of community organizations that were of benefit to him. The Elizabeth Peabody Playhouse, where he first learned acting. He was also at Boston College, where he took acting courses. And he worked. This is where he learned how to become a hustler because he worked a lot of odd jobs, selling newspapers, selling vacuum cleaners, folding chairs for the Boston Pops. He worked in a camera store. He worked in a card shop. I mean, he was all over that town.
That's what I remember reading something that you wrote in the Boston Globe that you said that you can take you can take the boy out of the West End, but you can't take the West End out of the boy.
Yeah, you can take the boy out of Boston, but you can't
Boston.
take Boston out of the boy. Yeah. Yeah, he had this work ethic that he brought with him, forged on the streets of the Depression era in Boston. So he always had it with him, And then I did a documentary with him in 2013. We went back there to kind of walk through his old neighborhood, and he reminisced quite a bit about his experience there. And he talked about the fact that he always had it with him, was always a part of him because he lived there till he was 18. And it really kind of molded his character, for which he was very, I think, really grateful to the city for what it had done for him.
Now, I want to let people know that this is not just your father's story. This is also your story. Mostly, I would say mostly your story about how you. Let's face it, Star Trek, when it first came out, almost immediately became iconic. Um, it- and
Mhm.
I remember I watched the documentary you did for the Love of Spock. Marvelous documentary, by the way. I really, if y'all can find it, if you can find it on Netflix or whatever, I highly recommend it. Um, he was it was kind of unknown what was going to happen. You said in your book in December 1964 he brought home pictures. Did he have the Vulcan makeup on when you first saw him?
Yeah, he
I mean,
brought home a couple of Polaroids, to show us. In December of '64, I was 8 years old, and it was one of those moments that you never forget because this is the first time I saw Spock, an image of Spock, and I was already watching Outer Limits and and Twilight Zone and my favorite Martian and stuff like that. I wonder if it was on then in '64. I was a big TV kid. There was a lot of great TV on, so I was kind of ready for that kind of thing. I was into comic books and into Batman, Superman stuff. So it was very exciting to see him play this kind of interesting, weird, alien from outer space. And so it was I'm really grateful that I was old enough to appreciate exactly what he was doing from the very beginning.
but not only did people love the Spock character, they loved the man behind the character too. And I mean, how did that I'm trying to find the right words to ask you this. How did it affect the family? Because I know that you had to share him with the world.
Well, yeah, it affected us greatly. I mean, very quickly, the show was quite popular, and he was becoming a star on TV, which had never really we had not experienced before. I mean, just it's interesting, but in 1966, we were driving up to San Francisco because he was showing a print of his film Death Watch, which is a very avant-garde, Jean Genet, existentialist, criminal mind. It was a very out there film and nothing for the mainstream. And it had a very kind of art house audience to it. And he was just completely unknown. My dad was just not a known commodity. And then suddenly he's on Star Trek and everybody's watching, and Spock is popular. So it affected us immediately. A lot of paparazzi, a lot of photographers coming by the house. No more dining out at restaurants. They were lining up at the table. We were in the Christmas parade, celebrity parade on Hollywood Boulevard. It was a very exciting time for us because our lives had changed so dramatically.
And during the 60s, I mean, it was the most turbulent period in the United most turbulent period. I know, I hear the little pooch down there. You'll hear mine soon, I guess, but hopefully she's sleeping at the moment. But during the 1960s, I mean, if it's anything like my family, my dad was of a different era than I was. And I liked a lot of things he couldn't understand. I got the impression that was the same way from reading your book, the same way with your dad.
Yeah, what's really interesting to me, Jim, is so ironic is that although my dad had created this pop culture icon, he really wasn't that in touch with popular culture at the time
Yeah.
at all. I mean, we didn't watch TV together. He wasn't into rock and roll. My mother was the pop culture person. She's the one who, facilitated my sister and I to see the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl, and we went to see a Cream farewell concert at the Inglewood Forum, and she took my sister to see Jimi Hendrix at the Hollywood Bowl. My mother was very, very much into what was happening. My dad was removed from that, so we didn't really have that to connect to. Star Trek was a connecting point for us because from my dad, as I say in the book, from a professional standpoint, from a career standpoint, it had a lot of meaning to him, and creating the role of Spock was very challenging for him and very rewarding for him. for me, I'm just a fan of the show. So I was into it immediately, and we were able to connect on that front. So it was just very interesting to me that we were not we kind of missed the boat on connecting on the popular cultural level.
And then Star Trek became such a big hit. Well, it became Spock became a big hit. Um, and I know that I don't know what kind of he had real good relations with everybody on the show. Even though I've heard and I don't know, don't want to get in too much into it, but with William Shatner, I mean they were good friends later on, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah. We Let's get into it. Why
Okay,
don't
let's get into it.
let's talk? Yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk all about Leonard and Bill. No, I'm just
Yeah. Oh, darn it. Okay.
I got plenty to spill. No, no, they were good friends during a period of my dad's life. They were very close for a while. I'm really grateful for that they were able to find each other. I mean, they were, they're two birds of a feather from my perspective. They're both from that era. They're 4 days apart. There are a couple of Jewish guys in outer space. They had a lot of similar experiences, as Bill says in my documentary. So, and it may have been that they were too much alike, and there was a lot of competition between them on the show. That's for sure.
Well,
But it
see,
was lovely that they formed a close relationship for a while.
I always thought that watching Star Trek when I watched it all the way through college, and of course, when you're in college, you think you know everything. Um, it's like the Star Trek McCoy, Spock, and Kirk, like the id, the ego, and the super ego. That's how I viewed it. Like, with McCoy being the emotional, being total emotion, Spock being total logic, and then you've got Kirk in the middle. I don't know how it was. Is that how your father viewed it, or anything like that? Anything close to that nature?
Well, we never talked about it in those terms, but the triumvirate has been written about and commented on many times. And I think that was really the big part of the success of the show is that they all were able to play off of each other, all of them, and they did it so beautifully. I mean, it's not just a Spock Kirk thing. I think McCoy added a whole new dimension that really, I think, made it really rich, deep, meaningful, sometimes funny. There was conflict between the three of them. There was camaraderie. There was comedy. I mean, they had it all. Between them. So I just love watching them on camera. I love the show myself, and I rediscovered it myself during my college years because everybody was emptying out of the dorm room at 5 o'clock, during the weeknights to watch in the TV room, and I started rewatching it again. And I just realized this is a great freaking show. It's so entertaining, and there's so because it's funny, it's poignant, it's deep, it's meaningful, and the characters are compelling. So it was a great combination.
I want to talk about your father. I love talking about your father. I want to talk a little bit about you though, because you became estranged from your father for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and I can understand that because I mean, with my dad, I became estranged from my family too. And the thing is that I consider it a different era. They were from different eras, so they couldn't understand, and I couldn't understand them. So enough of that. But the thing is that you received a letter. Your dad wrote you a letter, didn't he?
Yes. He wrote me a letter.
A rather long letter, as I
It
remember.
was a long letter. Yeah.
And and
There's a lot in there.
yeah, I don't want to get. I mean, for those of you who want to find out about the letter, read the book or watch the documentary. I'd rather you buy the book and read it. The thing is, though, is that it helped you on the road back to reconciling
Yes.
with your father.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the letter, I mean, just in general, the letter was my dad's kind of putting down on paper a lot of the issues that existed between us because we were estranged at the time. And and that was a conscious choice on my part because I was in 12-step recovery and we had just too much negative engagement between us. My dad was sober, but not really actively in recovery. I was trying to actively work a program, 12-step program, and in Al-Anon as well as in AA. Al-Anon is for family members of alcoholics and addicts, and so I was just like trying to keep my distance for a while and let things cool off. But it really, I think it was very difficult for him to keep that distance. And he wrote me a letter to try to explain why he had a lot of trouble with me, a lot of his complaints, resentments, a lot of the issues between us, a lot of the things that he, felt hurt him that I did, and I took that letter and made an amends to him for it, which is a part of my recovery. I was told to do it. At first, I wasn't willing, but then I became willing to do it. And once I made the amends to him, then things really changed in our relationship, and we were able to let go of a lot of the resentments we both held towards each other, and move on with our lives, to the point where had a pretty close, loving relationship. I would say it was the last 7 years of his life, so I'm really grateful for that.
You actually got to direct him in a couple of episodes. I think The Outer Limits, where the episode was I, Robot, as I recall, one of the best episodes of the series. And it was that. How did that feel with you being able to direct your father?
Well, it was a great experience. It was one of the, times when we were getting along that things were really clicking between us. It was his idea to approach the people who are producing the remake. It's a reboot series essentially. And I was looking for work in directing TV, and he said, "Listen, I would love to remake that show." He was in that episode as a supporting cast member, an episode that was always one of my favorites, and it was one of those experiences I had sitting at home watching TV on a Saturday morning when they're running the Outer Limits reruns, and there's iRobot, and there's my dad. I didn't know he was in there in
Hmm.
that episode. That happened all the time with him. So I did. I pitched the idea of me directing, dad acting, and they bought into the idea, and they had a writer do a rewrite on the script, and it was really a very rewarding time. My dad did a lot to help me with directing, teach me about the craft of directing, and a lot of that I got to put to use when we were in Vancouver making that show. But also, he was very nice about giving me a lot of pointers while we were shooting the show. In kind of like close quarters where he was not telling me what to do in front of the whole cast and crew. He would take me aside and say, "Hey, you know what? Don't cut the camera. Just keep it going and push in on me. You don't need to reset and get the close up. On this line is when things start to get heavy in the scene. Just push in with the camera and get it all in one. You're going to have it. It's going to save you some time." And I'm like, "Okay, that's what we're going to do." And then I would go back to the set and I go, "Okay, everybody, here's what we're going to do. We're going to just start wide. We're going to push in on this line on Leonard and just get this in a close up all in one." It was that kind of thing. So very rewarding experience. I think we turned in a really good episode.
It was a very good episode, and your father, he had directorial chops also. The Wrath of Khan. No, wait, was that him? That was his
Oh, it was Search for Spock
Search for
and
Spock.
Voyage Home. Yeah.
Yeah, Search for Spock and The Voyage Home. Those are his movies, Star Trek movies. And so he did great as a director also. Um, I loved him in the show In Search of. And I don't know, that show is not shown a lot. At least I haven't found it on TV yet. I'll keep hunting for it. But and he was also on Mission Impossible as a makeup artist in The Great Paris. Did he have, besides Spock, did he have a favorite character?
Well, I think one of his favorites was definitely the theater work he did was very rewarding for him, and that was a high point of his career. So I would say the musical theater he did is in Fiddler on the Roof, playing Tevye,
Yeah.
the milkman. I think that was one of his favorites. He was just phenomenal in that play. I mean, I think he would turn to theater roles that were really challenging for him that he really loved. I loved him, and I think he really enjoyed playing Martin Dysart, the psychiatrist in Equus, the theater production of Equus. I thought he was fabulous in that. I saw him in several performances do that in New York. Man in the Glass Booth. I mean, mostly roles in the theater. I think he would probably choose as his favorite and high points of his career.
Yeah, I liked him in when he was Vincent Van Gogh or Van Gogh or whatever, when he was on that one.
Yep.
The he was there for you a very, very harsh, very, very bad time during your life when you lost your wife, and my condolences to you for that.
Thank you.
Uh, he was there for you every step of the way, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean that's where I made an amends to him when he wrote the letter, and he kind of made a living amends to me by becoming the dad I always needed him to be when he showed up for me while my wife Martha was very sick. He was just a guy I could call at any time of the day. Sometimes he would call me up and invite me just to come to lunch to hang out with him. He took me to Friday night Shabbat services at Beit Teshuvah, a residential addiction treatment center that he had been a benefactor of, and financial supporting them and their programming. And I'm a board member there today. So yeah, he really showed up for me in a way that he was not simply not able to when I was younger, and he was out there trying to generate cash to keep the bill paying going and to keep his career going when he hit on Star Trek. So it was a tough time for me, but it was very satisfying to have him as somebody I could talk to at any given moment.
Do you have any other do you have any other films coming out? I mean, the book just came out this week. What is, anything happening on the stage or on the screen rather?
Well, no, I mean, I'm going to be promoting the book over the next few weeks. I'll be at the Star Trek convention in Las Vegas and Fan Fest in New York. There's going to be it's just mostly book signings, to try to help promote the book, and a lot more interview. The focus really is going to be on trying to get the awareness out about the book among
Yeah.
Star Trek fans and about and people who are looking for a good summer read.
That's what that's what I wanted to ask you about. You're going to the Star Trek conventions. Wh- What's it like seeing people dressed up like your father?
Well, I love it. I mean, it's a great experience for me. It's like reliving the whole excitement of the Star Trek era all over again. I mean, it's just a great way. Look, here's the thing, Jim. It's so hard to find really, stay connected to community
Hmm.
on this planet. It's really hard to find your people, and that's what's so beautiful about the conventions is people really find each other. They have a common interest. They have a common love of Trek and all the series, all the feature films. They love to cosplay. They love Leonard. People love meeting me because they think like they're shaking hands with Leonard DNA, and they just get so excited. I think it's wonderful. I love being at the conventions. It's a trip. It's very exciting. It's very rewarding, to hear a lot of, love for Leonard and the whole crew, the whole Enterprise crew. People are still showing up. Bill Shatner still goes. George goes. Walter goes. So uh, it's a great experience for me. It's wonderful to have that community out there, and it'll always be out there.
I was going to say you mentioned Leonard DNA. I can't help but think back to the Big Bang Theory episode that you were on, and for those of you who don't know, Sheldon Cooper, who played by marvelous Jim Parsons, he uh, he had a napkin that Leonard Nimoy had wiped his mouth on, and you mentioned or he mentioned that he has Leonard Nimoy's DNA. Uh, what
Yeah,
was that?
he wasn't as excited to meet me because he said that I only had half of Leonard's DNA. I had half of my mother's, but the napkin was pure Leonard Nimoy DNA, so he just worshipped that napkin.
Now when Star Trek first hit it big, uh, was it true the teen magazine published your home address?
Yes, that is my distinct recollection. We were interviewed by a number of fanzines at the time, and there was an issue as to where the fan mail should go. I mean, my dad, it was a little bit of a tussle with the studio because they didn't want to handle the expense of dealing with all that fan mail, and so for some reason, I remember distinctly remember seeing this in 16 magazine, that all fan mail to Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock should go to our home address in West LA, and we started getting sacks of mail. It was insane. I mean, it was kind of cool at first because you're like, reading all this stuff about how people love Spock. But then it's like, I can't, I'm trying to order a Spider-Man t-shirt through the, mail order, and I'm waiting for weeks to get the t-shirt, and all this mail keeps showing up, and it's always for him. So it was a little difficult, a little frustrating.
And y'all tried to answer it at first, didn't you?
But we were answering that mail. We were
Yeah.
stuffing like, this is family activity, as I talk about in my documentary. This was one of our family activities, answering his fan mail. It was kind of fun for a while. We were stuffing envelopes with that first picture of Spock, the first promo that we had. And it was cool. It was fun. But then it was like, oh my God, enough of the mail. It's just insane.
I
There's
remember
there's no mailman. It's just a mail truck with sacks of this stuff.
I remember reading in his book, uh, I am not Spock. And I remember him saying that he had to negotiate with the studio to get a person to handle his fan mail. Um, it just is amazing that when he had that first book out, I Am Not Spock, he he really tried to, I want to say, distance himself from the character, but then later on he embraced it, it seemed.
Yeah, I think it was a misunderstood. It was a misunderstanding. It was a cosmic misunderstanding between him and the fans. What he was trying to point out was that Spock is a character and Leonard's an actor. It's just a matter of semantics for him. He really never was trying to distance himself from the character. It was just him literally saying, people come up to me and say, Mr. Spock, I love you so much. It's like, my name's Leonard, by the way. I come from Boston, not from Vulcan. So, but I think he realized that, he insisted on that title. The publisher didn't even want to use that title. He insisted on it, and he got hit pretty hard by the fans who were pretty angry with him about that title. And he had to repent for it by writing another autobiography, memoirs that were entitled "I Am Spock."
I am Spock, yes, and I can understand that because I mean, Spock character was threatening to take over the whole personality. I mean, it was great that he was able to find work after Star Trek, which a lot of the people on the show were so typecast they couldn't. So, but I tell you what, it's been so much fun. I could go on talking with you all night, but I really enjoyed talking to you tonight. For Light to Camera author Adam. Adam Nimoy is the author. The book is The Most Human: Reconciling with My Father. And if that sounds familiar, it's from the Star Trek Wrath of Khan. That's what James Kirk says at Spock's eulogy. Oh, I'm going to spoil it here for some people for the two people on Earth who haven't seen it. Um, that's what he says at Spock's eulogy, isn't it?
That is correct. That's a direct quote.
So, Adam, I appreciate you being on Light Camera Author tonight.
Jim, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.